Okay, good evening, everyone. Really good to see you guys. I'm going to be trying to do everything at once. I'm just going to quickly give an introduction to this evening. My name is Victoria, and I run a platform called Love of Culture, which is an arts and literary platform which explores and celebrates Black voices, experiences, and creativity in arts and literature. And I do this through book club events, live conversations, talks, curating art exhibitions, working with emerging and established artists and writers, poetry evenings and community arts programs, and I'm now branching out into cultural education and training. And tonight, I am really, really honoured, deeply honoured, to be in conversation with an iconic legend. I'm going to reel off. Honoured to have Jamel Shabazz in the building with us. He is a documentarian photographer, which we'll go into, who for over 40 years has captured the essence of Black and brown communities through their joy, their pain, their discrimination, and the fervent fight for just to exist in this world equally. His photographic documentation of New York and beyond has cemented him as one of the most innovative and iconic photographers, of his time. Shabazz has been shown in over 24 international solo exhibitions, including Men of Honor, A Time Before Crack, Pieces of Man, Represent, Back in the Days, and Seconds of My Life, to name a few, and featured in an even longer list of group showings, including at Art Basel, Miami, Brooklyn Museum, the V&A, which some of us London folk will know, Paris Studios, and Adidas Photo Fest in Ethiopia, again, to name a few. Jamel also supports and works as a teaching artist and lecturer across a wide range of organisations and educational institutes, centred on inspiring young people in the field of socially conscious photography. Jamel is the author of 5 monographs and have contributed to numerous others, and is also working on many more creative projects. And so can we put our hands together and say a warm welcome to Jamel Shabazz. Hi, Jamel.
For that introduction, Victoria. I'm truly humbled by your words, and I'm honored to share this platform with you and the listening audience. So thank you so much for that. I'm no icon. I'm just a regular person who just happen to have a camera. So again, I appreciate the words that you shared, and I'm truly honored to be here with you and the listening audience today. So thank you so much for this invitation.
Oh, no, it's absolutely my pleasure. Just a quick note for everyone. We're going to have a conversation, and we're going to listen to some music and listen to and view some of his incredible work. There is a chat, so please feel free to use that chat if you'd like to ask questions, but the time for actual questions will be at around 9:10, just so we can get into the conversation. We had a pre-talk and we spoke for such a long time that I really think you guys are going to enjoy this evening of inspiring conversation. So yeah, let's
Thank
begin.
everybody for taking time out of their day to join in this conversation. So I thank the listening audience for coming through, and I'm here to answer any questions you have, both now, during the course of the conversation, and offline. So thank everyone. I thank everyone for joining in this exchange.
Yes, thank you all. Okay, so to go back, looking at your early life, Brooklyn born and raised, I wanted to ask you what community felt like to you back in the day in Brooklyn growing up. How was it for you? What did your kind of some of your early experiences of childhood look like, and how did photography fit into that?
That's such a great question. I grew up in the community of South Brooklyn, Red Hook Houses, which is one of the largest public housing projects in Brooklyn itself. It was a great sense of community back then. This is the early 1960s. I came from a two-parent household. I had brothers and sisters. I had aunts and uncles that also lived in the community. We had a bakery, an active bakery, which caused the community to smell like cinnamon and nutmeg and vanilla on any occasion. We had a gateway to a larger world, the Gowanus Canal, that gave us this wonderful view of the world outside of our community. For the most part, I'll say that over 90% of everyone in the community had mothers and fathers. Many of the men at that time had served in the military, and it was a great sense of community. We had a number of parks. We had a Olympic-sized stadium. We had a number of baseball fields and just beautiful parks. It was a great landscape and a wonderful place to grow up as a young child. You know, we had an Olympic-sized pool. We had a great community center, and it was a good time, despite everything that was going on in America at that time with the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement. You know, we were kind of like removed from that. But it was, for me, it was a time of innocence, community, and just a great time period to be growing up. And it's through that experience that I was pretty much introduced to the global language of photography, because my father was a photographer, and he was like heavily into it. He's professional. So not only did he have a lot of images, but he used to bring home a number of publications on any given occasion. But even more important than that, you know, he came from a tradition of the family photo album. So it was passed on generational. So when we grew up, we always had access to these beautiful family albums that were in our house. And that gave me an opportunity to see the power of family and the importance of documenting that family. So early on, I saw and I appreciated photography from that perspective. And as time would expand, you know, again, with the war going on, I was inclined to look at publications that addressed that, because I wasn't being taught that in school. So it's publications like Life magazine and Look and Ebony that kind of like informed me at a very early age of what was going on outside my community, in addition to National Geographic. So I became in love with the visual language of photography. Mm-hmm. And after reading all the books in my father's library, I would go to the local library and just look for more publications that were filling my mind with answers, you know, that I was seeking at about 9, 10 years old. And again, I attribute one book that really changed my life, Black and White America by Leonard Freed, that really caused the transformation early on. Of course, that particular book, which I often speak about, sat prominent on my father's coffee table. All of his other books and publications were in the library, but it was something about the book Black and White America that was signed that sat center stage by itself on our family coffee table. And it felt almost like that book was tailor-made for me as a young man. My father and I at that time, we never had a conversation about it. It just sat there. And it was something about that book that caused an awakening within me as a young man, because unlike the images I was looking at from National Geographic and Life magazine that dealt with a larger world, this particular book dealt with New York for the most part and the segregated South. So it allowed me an opportunity to see a world outside my community with people that looked like me. And not only did I digest every photograph in the book, and it introduced me to segregation, racism, and then a whole new language too, because I studied all of the photographs in the book, but then I read the book. And then when I read the book, I would have to get the dictionary because I'm being introduced to another language. A number of vocabulary words I never heard before, like the term racism, integration, lynching, rape. You know, I've never heard those words before. They were never being taught in school. So that one book will educate me to a wide range of things. It dealt with social issues, it dealt with political issues, it dealt with racism, it dealt with mass incarceration. And that would pretty much inform so much of my interest in photography at that time.
Sounds incredible. I've already written that down, the book. So in terms of when did you pick up your first camera, and what types of pictures were you taking at the time? And did you see then that you had a talent for it, or was it just kind of, I just want to document what's going on right now with my friends? What was it?
That's a really good question too. I at an early age, when I moved from Red Hook into East Flatbush, I was introduced to a leader, a major figure in a local gang called the Badass Stompers. And through my good friend, he brought me to his cousin's home, who happened to be a photographer. And he had these big, giant photo albums of the gang. that he documented, but they didn't look like a gang. Because these men, unlike that image that we see of gangbangers, these men were dressed very debonair. They wore beaver hats, straight leg pants, and it was flare pants, shark skins, tailor-made. It was something incredible about these images. All of these guys were much older than me, but they were really powerful images. And the closest photographs that mirror that were pretty much the album covers back in the days of the Temptations and the Four Tops. But this was a local gang here. And when I saw those pictures, I was mesmerized. And I said to myself at that point, I want to be a photographer and I want to capture images that were similar, that represented dignity. So I rushed back home, and back then all the families pretty much had Kodak Instamatic cameras laying around the house, you know, basic point and shoots. My mother had both a 110 and a 126 inexpensive cameras with film in it. And I took those cameras out, and I returned to my local junior high school, and I started photographing my friends. And back then, when you took photographs, you know, no instruction, just point and shoot. And I pretty much had that. Whatever reason back then, I guess from looking at album covers and so many photographs over the years, I knew how to compose an image. I understood how to position the subjects in an area where the light was proper. So I was capturing my friends early on at 15 years old. And then what we would do, we would take we would all chip in and buy the film and take it to the local drugstore, because back then you didn't have the 1 hour photos and Photoshops. You took it to the drugstore. You put the film in, you waited about 5 days, come back, and I'll never forget seeing my first photographs. And it was like magic to me. You know, it blew me away that I was able to freeze time and motion and capture the beauty of my peers. And at that point, it gave me a sense of purpose, because prior to that, I didn't really have a purpose in life. Now, having a camera, I have a purpose. And at that early stage, that camera became pretty much like a compass, like to guide me on a particular path. Yeah. A lot of my friends at that time, they were embracing graffiti. Matter of fact, all of us were graffiti artists. And it didn't really work well with me. It was just something about the camera that I felt was more my calling. But practically everyone within my circle back then were graffiti artists. We had Evil Eyes, we had La Boy, we had AG, you know, Cisco. It was everyone wrote. But my calling was the photography, and I'm so glad that I embraced it.
And so are we. I wanted to talk a bit about your time actually skipping. So you've got your camera, you are documenting your friends, you've seen your first kind of your first work essentially. What did you do after that? What did you carry on as a hobby, or what happened next? Did you go into a different career? I know that you went later into the military. Did that come soon after that? And how and why did that happen?
It pretty much came shortly afterwards, because what happened in '75, when I'm embracing photography, my parents got divorced. And now that changed everything. Now there's no funds to get the film done. And I went astray at that point, because now I come from a household with a mother and father living in a private house. And now there's a divorce. And my father told my mother she had to leave. You know, so now we went with her. And now I couldn't embrace photography no more. So now I'm dealing with very difficult times in my life. You know, the path now has gotten really crooked. And I lost, and I went astray for the most part. And I left school because there was no therapy at that time to help a person who went through a divorce. Nobody really understood that, you know, and I think that's what really created my compassion and empathy for young people, because here I am 15 years old and my parents divorced, and there's no safety nets out there. There's no therapy. There's no one explaining this to us. We go from living in the house and then we have our own rooms, and now I'm sleeping on the floor, you know, and I'm going through a lot of personal struggle. So I decided at that point that I needed to get away. And, you know, at 16 years old, I decided that I need to go in the military. So I had to be 17 to join. And I decided that this is going to be my path right now. My uncles before had went in. There was no war going on at that time. The Vietnam War had just ended. So I felt it was a safe time. My father was totally against it, but my mother agreed with it. So my mother signed me. And so when I turned 17, I enlisted. And I started on that particular path in my life. It started me, you know, the training throughout America. You know, I got my basic training and my advanced infantry training, and I was going to be stationed in South Germany at the age of 17 years old. You know, so that became a very important part of my journey, because I needed to leave. And I'm glad that I did leave at that time because there was a lot going on in America at that time, especially in my community. The blackout came during the summer of '77. There was a lot of that spirit of brotherly love that we once had was now slowly fading away. A lot of young men were falling victim to the streets. And it was just a really good time that me and my good friend, Lamel, we just got away, and it would help to change our lives. You know, one of the best decisions I ever made. So I ended up in Germany for 3 years.
Wow. And what was it like in terms of your expectations for it and the reality? So usually we hear people have, or even sounding like what you said, it's an escape. You needed to escape. You were thankful for the opportunity to go. What was the actual reality like? And did you bring your camera? Did you want to document that part of your life, or was that just an escape from everything at that point?
That's a real good question. It was a deep experience because, you know, as one that has a great love for history, I studied the history of Germany. I was fascinated with war because my father had a library with a lot of books that dealt with war. So, you know, I'll go back just to World War One. You know, so I studied World War One and everything was going on in Europe at that time, and in addition to World War Two. So I went to Germany with clear understanding on what I was stepping into. I didn't want to go to Germany. I wanted to go to Hawaii, like most of us want to do, but they gave us Germany. And I embraced that journey because just in the 1960s, both my uncles were stationed in Germany. So now I'm in a position to kind of like get a sense of what they were experiencing. So I'm there, and it was a very interesting time because we were talking about the 70s, and a lot of the former German soldiers were still alive. I was able to see Hitler's desire to produce a master race, and I was keen on that at 17. So I saw a lot of that. I saw the former German soldiers, some of them missing limbs, and then I understood they were German soldiers as well because we did interact with them on a certain level. But I was aware of that, so it enlightened me. But what was most profound about the experience being in the military was the fact that it's a microcosm of society to a great degree. And when I got over there, within the army itself, you're meeting people from all over the country and a lot of the continental states. So there I met people from places I would have never imagined, from California, from Alabama, from Georgia, from Texas. And we are all pretty much on the same level to a great degree. And it was pretty much foreign for us because now I'm beginning to see the difference, the distinction between the cultures that we have. That New York has its own unique culture and style, and the other states have theirs as well. But it gave me an opportunity to connect with people around America and start to communicate. I didn't bring my camera with me at that time because it didn't belong to me, so I didn't have one at that point. And it's unfortunate that my father didn't guide me and tell me to bring a camera with me at that particular time. So I went without a camera, but I went with a desire to want to learn. And back then, unlike today, when we look at what the computer is, back then in Europe, and even before I went in the army, most people that were stationed in Europe and even in the military, what was big to them was music. So one of the first things a lot of soldiers got was their stereo equipment. So that's what I got involved in early on. I got heavily into music. And back then on the military bases, we had a post exchange, a PX. They had a lot of music, and every room had music in it. It's amazing, you know, regardless of where you came from, the different rooms you came from had music that reflected your culture. So a lot of the West Coast people would listen to Steely Dan, and they would listen to soft rock. And then you had the funk music. You had people from the South that would listen to blues and funk music. The New York people listened to rap and disco. Matter of fact, the hip hop would come a little later on, but a lot of disco music at the time. So music was everything. It was there that I embraced music from different cultures. I embraced salsa. I embraced reggae, rock music, R&B, jazz, everything, because it was all there. And now you have the time on your day off to sit and listen to music, you know. And I even have my original mixtapes that I made back in the days, which I can't wait to get my reel-to-reel hooked up. And these are some of my original tapes from back in the days. And I got Joe Bataan, the Funky 4+1, Mass Production, The Emotions, Ozzy Brothers. And I still have so many reel-to-reels because back in the old days, what was everything was making the tape. You know, you go in your room, throw your headphones on. Matter of fact, you go and you borrow albums from everybody. You know, you got your own, but you borrow albums and you say, I'm going to just sit down today, spend about 5 hours and make me a reel-to-reel. And I would just sit and make these incredible tapes, and it would put me in the zone. So that was everything back then. I was really heavily into music, and education. So those are the two focuses I had during my time in the military.
That sounds incredible. And I wanted to say, kind of ask your journey coming back to New York, and what you found there. And again, going from not having a camera and really experiencing and living what it was like connecting with so many people across America within Germany, and having that time coming back to America when Reagan was
Yes.
the just hell, for Black people living in America. What was it like coming back? How did you transition back? And how did you transition back? And did you pick up your camera straight away, or was there some time for that? Was there, you needed to kind of pick up a job and, really like process your time in the army?
That's another really great question. I came back from Germany now with a camera. I had a Canon AE1 camera. I didn't really know how to use it over there, so I had it. And when I came home, I lived with my father, who was a photographer. And I have to say, an enemy who became a friend gave me an enlarger. So now I set up a dark room. My father helped me create a dark room within our home, within my laundry room. And my father started to put me under the wing to guide me in photography. So I came home to a very interesting time too, because I came home to a war. I came home to an environment where during the time I was gone, there was a lot of hatred amongst young people. Guys that just a few years earlier were friends with each other. Something happened, and a lot of young men were being murdered at the hands of other young men, and many of them I knew. And I was really troubled behind that, because I was like, what happened? What caused this massive transformation during the short time I was gone? Because mind you, before I left, we were coming into a great consciousness as a people. We were greatly inspired by the miniseries Roots that came on. And when that came on during January 1977, it caused a movement amongst young people to grow into consciousness. And it was a spirit of brotherly and sisterly love at that point, during that state. Yes. And then when I went away, I came home expecting to find that. But instead, I came home to a lot of division, hatred, and death. And it bothered me. So now I realized that I have to do something about this here. I have to be proactive. Because while I was in Germany, I learned about the Black arts movement, and I came home a pretty conscious individual. Yeah. Reggae music had influenced me. So I became a very person who embraced simplicity, and I was a basic brother, and I just want to learn more. I immediately got involved in the Black arts movement at that time, going to different cultural events where I had an opportunity to see Sonia Sanchez perform The Last Poets, Steel Pulse, and so much. I came home to that because I wanted more of that. But within my immediate community, there was a lot of death and destruction going on. And it was people who were coming to me, knowing that I came home from the military. My partner came home with me because we went in around the same time. Yeah. Now we coming home to young men that want to learn military training to fight against the enemy, and the enemies I knew. And I was troubled behind that. And I said, something has to change. I can't allow this to exist. So what I started to do, I had my camera, and my father was teaching me the basics of it. He taught me really well how to process film, how to develop prints, what to look for. And then I went on assignment, and I would go to my local high school that I attended a few years earlier with my camera, and I would engage these young people that were pretty much the little brothers and sisters of people from my generation. And they all embraced me, they knew me, and I started photographing them. But I used that as an opportunity to really speak to them about what was going on. Like Marvin Gaye's song, What's Going On, that was my vibration. What's happening, brother? That was my vibration. I'm just coming back on the scene. I want to know what's going on. And they were telling me. And I was building a relationship with a lot of these young brothers and sisters. So I was like their big brother. And I tried to use that opportunity to encourage them to go to school, to love one another, to respect one another, to eat right, to think right, to have goals and objectives. So that's what it was really all about at that point. And the camera became the compass that guided me to them. Without it, I can still engage them. But it was something about the language of photography and the fact that I even had an interest in them. So I started photographing the kids in the local high school and in the local community. I would get to work, I would print the work, I would go back up to the school, I would give them prints, and I would develop a relationship with them. I also came back from Germany, learned how to play chess. chess is one of the greatest gifts I was given when I was overseas. So when I came home, I started teaching a lot of the young brothers how to play chess in the neighborhood, because to me, it was teaching them how to understand conflict and obstacles and struggle and decision making. So I often walk with my camera and my chessboard, and I use that as an opportunity to just talk to a lot of young brothers. And to my surprise, I had all of them. I had so many of them, and it would be years later I will find out that so many of them were enemies to one another, and I didn't even realize that. But I was neutral, and I would just travel around during my free time. But before I went back into the workforce, I had a lot of time off, so I had a lot of time to explore my community again, because I wanted to get back to find out what was going on. Because while I was overseas, I thought about the trains and the buses and the streets, and I want to see that again. I just took to the street, and then I became very proactive. You know, I was looking at things that troubled me. I was seeing the poverty. You know, I saw the homelessness and the despair and the prostitution, and I started to document that and try to use that as a form of communication. I would take those pictures back up to the high schools and speak to young people about knowing themselves and planning for the future, so we don't end up like this here. And at the same time, we have to strive to use our platform to try to address these issues that are impacting our community. So some of my earlier work is a combination of high school and local kids in the neighborhood, but also social conditions that were existing that were really troubling me.
I was going to say, I'd like to take that. It feels like a natural interlude to show some of your work, listen to that favorite song, and give us a minute to just appreciate some of that. So, in
a sense, that's what I came home to. I came home to just beautiful, innocent children that weren't aware of what was going on around the world. And here you have these children that got an old shopping cart from a supermarket, and they just having a good time. And this photograph was actually taken like about 2 blocks away from my home.
Wow.
I focused my lens early on a lot of children because they represented hope in the future.
Yeah. It's absolutely stunning.
This is one of my earlier photographs taken at one of the high schools, and it's just friends. You know, I call it the unknown riders. And it was just everything about this moment that was just perfect timing. You know, the bite, the friendship, you know, having the helmets on and the visor, you know, with that type of effect. This started my creative process. I like to engage people and talk to them. A lot of my earlier work, it's a balance between confronting subjects and posing them and engaging them and just taking candid images. But these are just local kids from the neighborhood that I knew. And I'm happy I was able to capture this moment and help them see what I saw. Because a lot of times when you approach people that you don't really know, you have to have them understand that your intentions is sincere. And then when you explain to them what is you see and why you want to capture it, you're able to get them to stand and pose. And not only did I capture this photograph, but a friendship was established afterwards. Because that's what it's about too. Not just getting the image and leaving, but it's about building relationships with the people in which I photographed. This is at the high school when I first came home from the military. And these are 2 women that I saw early on. And I knew that, you know, twins, you can't go wrong. You know, you see twins and sisters and best friends, it's a good subject matter. So Edie and Evelyn, and Evelyn, I met them early on, and they were open to the camera, and I photographed them. And this is at the high school. They were stylish women back then. And it was just a really good time. So this is one of my favorite photographs. It's just the style and how it was back then. So this is just a moment. It's really interesting too, because I just rediscovered this photograph. You know, I had it buried away, and I came upon it. And it's very special to me because it reminds me of me and my cousin and how we were when we were younger. It's taken in Brooklyn and just represents 2 best friends, which I found out recently happen to come from the same community I grew up in. So this photograph is very important to me, and perhaps it'll be a cover to one of my books one day.
Oh, wow. I'll do one more for now.
Action in the photography industry, I was called upon to do photo shoots, and this happens to be a photo shoot I did, you know, with a magazine called, I believe, Black Book. And this young model, Keisha, you know, I met her for the first time, and I have a love for the subway. I thought that it would serve as a really good landscape, you know, to create images that are just realistic. So this is one of my favorite photographs. It's just my fashion. And that represents maybe 1/3 of my photography.
Thank you. Honestly, it was so difficult choosing. I just want to choose so many. There was and every photo has a story, and that's what I really cherish, that that you remember, and that you talk about it and you bring it to life. And I think what I love about photography is it captures that time and moment. And if I don't know who that is, then it's still as special, but it's more special and more poignant when I know the backstory. And I
Yeah.
love the fact that on your social media platforms, you really get to see some of the stories and the connections that people, even when I posted the other day, someone said, that's me in the picture. And I was like, oh, it's incredible that you are able to connect us across, the diaspora like that, across the United States. I wanted to ask about your experience when you came back and going into the US correction system, and how you brought essentially your light into that dark place, and how you used photography as kind of an escape and therapy as well. And I didn't manage to bring one of the shots that you had, of a lawyer talking to his to an inmate about his case. But I wanted to just talk to you about how that was for you, how that experience was for you coming back.
What happened to a lot of veterans that came home from the military, we went, our objective was to go to school and go into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
So my father told me that it's very important I take every state and federal exam, to get a job with the government, because it will give you stability.
Mm-hmm.
And he was right. So I took a number of tests, and it so happens that the Department of Corrections called me. And I had an uncle that was a correction officer. It's not something I really wanted to do, but I realized at the time that we were living in, this was my destiny, and it was my new assignment in life. And I've been given this task to go into the system. Prior to becoming a correction officer, I learned about the Attica rebellion that took place in 1970-71. I learned about the jail riots that took place in Vietnam with soldiers back in around that same time period. I read the prison letters of George Jackson during my time overseas, and I learned a lot about political prisoners, as a young soldier. So, and I had friends that fell victim to the system, some guilty and some innocent. Mm-hmm. So I realized that this was my assignment. It's probably going to be one of the most difficult assignments in my entire life, but I have to embrace it, that this is the path that I'm destined to go on. And the camera, again, was my compass that will help me navigate through that situation. So in 1983, I became an officer, and it was a very critical time because the crack epidemic was on the horizon. I knew something bad was happening even before crack actually hit. A lot of young men and women were falling victim to the system. So when I got on the job, I was assigned to an adolescent facility. I'll never forget how it made me feel inside. I'm looking at hundreds upon hundreds of young men, pretty much 16 to 20 years old at this time. So many of them, so many hopes and dreams, and young men of color. And I was paying behind that. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I had a great task on my hands, because it was a very negative, violent atmosphere. Regardless to the training that you got at the Correction Academy, nothing could prepare you for that, because you go through an academy for 8 weeks and you learn everything from law to mental health issues, first aid, a number of things to give you a foundation. But nothing was able to prepare me for that, other than my friends that were forcibly incarcerated for a crime they didn't commit. They became my guides to help me navigate through that world, because I had 2 friends that were incarcerated for a crime they didn't commit. So they pretty much guided me on how to move in that environment. Mm-hmm. And then when I got there, and I remember working in the area for the first time, there was people I knew, personally from the street, good people that got caught up in the system. So I'm dealing with that element. It was very painful, to see people that that are in this very violent atmosphere. Because within that system, there's pretty much 2 officers, and you're dealing with 60 detainees. And Rikers Island is not a prison. It's a jail facility, one of the largest in the country. And the people that are there are pre-trial detainees, and most can't post bail. So they're there because they can't afford to get the bail. So now you have this situation, this very volatile environment. A lot of hatred is inside there, a lot of division, people that are warring against each other. There's gangs and everything, and you have to go and deal with this right here. You don't have any weapon other than your mind. So I went in there and I studied psychology and a host of other sciences that gave me a foundation to they were spiritual weapons that allowed me to go in there with that mindset. But I was still encountering a lot of hatred, and an opposition every day. So you're going into a very different world. Here I'm leaving a world where I'm respected, and now I'm stepping into a world of people don't know me, they don't care, they hate you because you wear that uniform. And then you have young co-workers, you know what I mean? Who are they? A lot of them oftentimes are Black and brown. And then you might have others that might have other agenda, that they just look at everyone as just being inmates. I went in there very empathetic. One of the great lessons I learned in the academy was empathy, to put yourself in that person's situation. And I strove to do that every chance I got. And it was very painful, because regardless to what I'm trying to do, it's a very violent atmosphere. And you in there now, it's about survival. And just seeing the brutality that people would inflict upon each other, the stabbings, the slashings, the rapes, the suicides. You're dealing with this every day from between 8 to 16 hours a day in this type of atmosphere. And you're trying to do your very best to pull people under the wing and guide them. And it's just so many. It's like being on a battlefield in a war, and you're the medic, and everyone is calling you, everybody's wounded. So you got to deal with that, and then you got to deal with opposition. So I dealt with it, and it was the photography and the music that was my therapy, because I kept my camera with me during my travels. When the opportunity presented itself, I got a few photographs of the co-workers and some of the people I knew that were incarcerated. And then when I got off work, I would go shoot in the street to appreciate freedom. But more importantly, it was important for me to use that experience to talk to young people who were on that fence, because now the crack epidemic hit, and a lot of young people are gravitating towards that lifestyle, that world of bling and fast money. It was very fair seeming, and a lot of young people falling victim to it. Now I got to use my platform, and I got to talk to them about what I'm seeing every day. It's like, yo, you don't want to go up in there. I had one young brother that felt that going to jail was a rite of passage, and he wanted to go to prove that he could do it. So I snatched him up. I would be coming home after dealing with a very difficult day, and he was a young aspiring illustrator, and I would have him draw a riot for me. I'll have him draw a fight in the day room. And it's through that inspiration that he decided that ain't the place to be. Because I would come home and he would be waiting there for me every day, wanting to hear tales of jail, and he wanted to know if I knew all these legendary stick-up kids and all that. And he used to frustrate me. So I started to just guide him on that level. But I work with great determination to try to convince young people that's not the route to go. I said, if anything, I need you to become a correction officer like me, so we can make a difference in there. Because at that time, we had a 20-year pension. You get on at 23, you retire at 43 years old. It wasn't bad. So I was trying to encourage young people, that's where we need you at right now, because you can go in there and be like a teacher. You could be a source of inspiration despite the hardships, and there's going to be many, but you can make a difference in it. So that's what I tried to do. So the photography became my therapy, and a lot of the images that you see from the early 80s taken downtown Brooklyn, those are moments that I used to just talk to young people about what was going on. That was important to me. So when I went downtown Brooklyn with my camera, I used it as a magnet to say, can I talk to you brothers for a minute? What you want? Man, when I look at you brothers, I see greatness. Can I get a picture, y'all? Why you want our picture for? I started to engage them. And then as time would go on, back then in the 1 hour photo came, I would get the pictures printed, 1 hour, go back and give them pictures and develop relationships with all these young brothers that some of them were potential stick-up kids, and they were in that life. And I would gradually start to kind of like build with them about who I was when the opportunity was right. Sometimes you couldn't say it because some might look at you as the enemy, but I just let them know that I was sincere. And then sadly, some of them would fall victim to the system, and then others would even get on the job. So it was a very difficult time, but the majority of my work from the 80s was a result of going to and from work.
Mm-hmm. That sounds incredibly moving and painful, but yet cathartic when you are kind of outside of that and able to make those relationships and hopefully enact some change within those young people's lives.
Yes, and for the listening audience to better understand that,
Yeah.
it's good to look at the Attica Rebellion, because
Hmm.
it's due to that that really allowed me to get on the job and others like me, because one of the things that the Black and Hispanic Latino prisons wanted were more officers of color.
Yeah.
So that incident that took place inspired more of us to get on the job at that point. So that's important. And then there's a play that turned into a movie, which is very profound, and it's called Short Eyes.
Yeah.
And you Google Short Eyes on YouTube, it'll give you a glimpse into that horrible world of incarceration and what goes on in there. Short Eyes, and even ours, ours that came on HBO, it's real, But that was the journey I had to go on for 20 years to be where I'm at right now.
Which is profound, to be honest, because, and it comes through in your documenting of the people that you meet, that you capture the essence of so much of what people were going through back then and in that moment. So you can really see joy when it's joyful, and you can really see pain or when they're unsure about themselves, with it coming through in your pictures, which I love, because it can engage people on every level of your humanness. So there's such powerful pieces. I wanted to talk to you about the music, actually, going back, because yeah, when you are also known as a kind of fashion photographer, as well as someone who documented some of the greatest kind of hip hop artists there were, and I wanted to talk to you about how that journey became, and what music meant to you at the time, and how you managed to capture it. Because when looking at your photos, you can really, it feels like it's coming through. If you're listening to Mayumi Says, or if you're listening to some of the roots, you can really see what life was like. And I wanted to ask you what influences in music did you have at the time? Did you listen to that when you were processing your pictures, or what inspiration?
Music was everything for me. I mean, like I said, in Germany, I had my reel to reel, I had my albums, I got involved in everything. It informed my spirit. Back in the early days when I was walking the streets, I had my Walkman with my music in it. And I listened to songs that reflected my spirit at that time, the frequency I wanted to be on, the frequency I was trying to get others to get on. So of course it was the Marvin Gaye. Everything that Marvin Gaye did in his What's Going On album is a reflection of my heart and soul. That album touches me in so many ways. Save the Children, Flying High, What's Going On, What's Happening, Brother. Of course, Curtis Mayfield of the Superfly album, No Thing on Me, Little Child Running Wild. That was the soundtracks of my life. And the influences that the album covers had back then on me. The Jackson 5 were one of the first. They were close to me in age, and they were our heroes early on. It's through the Jackson 5 that inspired me to pick up the bass guitar. And Kool and the Gang, matter of fact, Kool and the Gang was the very first band I saw perform as a kid at the Apollo. And looking at them, I drew a lot of inspiration. Back then, we had programs like Soul with Ellis Hazlitt that came on public television, and that provided us with a space where we could see a lot of artists that weren't getting a lot of shine. So I got introduced to Earth, Wind and Fire, Ashford and Simpson, and then we had Soul Train. So music was everything for us. And then we had the Jackson 5 cartoons that came on back in the days. So music informed so much. First of all, it educated me to what was going on in the larger world. When I spoke about Gil Scott-Heron, Marvin Gaye, and Curtis Mayfield, they were speaking about the issues of that time. In the Bottle by Gil Scott-Heron helped me to better understand those who had fallen victim to alcoholism, including my father. So it educated me. Curtis Mayfield, Back to the World, helped me to better understand those men that served in Vietnam and what they were coming home to. So it was a very important part of my process constantly. Steel Pulse, when I heard them in Europe, it really did something to me. It created a revolutionary spirit inside me. And it helped me to better understand my brothers and sisters from the Caribbean and the role that reggae music had played. So it's the cornerstone. Revolution by Dennis Brown is a song that touches my heart. Umi Says is my national anthem. That's what I feel. If there's any song that manifests my heart and soul, it's that song that speaks to me. You know, that's what I'm about. That's what it's all about with me. You know what I mean? And sometimes I mean, it really just manifests my pain and my determination at the same time, and my will to continue to move on. And as it does today, I would not be where I'm at today if it wasn't for my music. There's moments of meditation where I got to shut down. I got to get into my music. You know, I have a great love for my female artists. It's people like Phyllis Hyman and Tina Marie and Jean Carn and Angela Bofield, you know, that inspired me early on, because with the women vocalists, they sing to my soul personally. So there's something about those vocalists and the impact that they had. To balance out a lot of the confusion and that I was experiencing every day going to work, I would go to concerts, you know, and I would see live performances that were very helpful in helping me appreciate the artists and the music at the same time. So music is everything, you know. Like I said, to this day, I have a great love for it. My social media feeds, it's all on there. It's a reflection of what's in my heart.
It is, and there's I've collated a playlist which I'll put on Spotify. Well, it's up on Spotify, but I'll let you guys know afterwards, which is inspired a lot by your feed and your images and music that we spoke about. So I wanted to talk about connection and liberation, because when your work explores the relationship with identity and culture, tradition, music, and a unifying bond across the diaspora. And a lot of people know your work from New York, but actually you did a whole monograph around called Represent, which was where you documented from several countries around the world. And I wanted to talk about why you decided to do that. Why did you decide to step out of that kind of where you're based, and what it meant for you, and what connection means to you? And yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that.
Yes, that's another great question. I was inspired greatly by National Geographic magazine, and it's through that publication that it allowed me to see a wider world outside my community and representation. So in the 1990s and to this day, you know, I started going to various cultural events to better understand people. And it kind of started with Rikers Island, working in the jail. I needed to understand people from Puerto Rico, you know, and the Dominican Republic and other places. So I decided on my vacation I would go to better understand it, because I felt that if you could better understand people and their culture, you better able to relate to them. And I needed that in jail, because sometimes it's one-sided, where people, you know, because there was a war going on between the Latinos and the Blacks, and it really bothered me. So it's during that time I decided that I need to spend time in the Latino community, to document them and learn more about the culture. I need to go to different parades and celebrations, and I need to go to their nations to understand how they live. So that kind of like propelled me to move forward, because I want to know. And again, the camera was my compass that will guide me. And it was all centered on just exploring life and trying to meet and connect with people. You know, with the camera being that compass, it put me in a position to just go to so many places I would never imagine. You know, so it was like my destiny to go to places like Japan. You know, my only understanding of Japan was due to World War II, you know, and same with Korea, the Korean War. So now I'm able to go and meet and see these people for the same time and learn people, you know, learn about the different cultures, and it enhanced me. And I met so many amazing people, because again, if you just limit it to your community, you know, you're not going to realize there's a larger world out there. So I started traveling a lot on my own in the early beginning. And as I elevated as a photographer, it made it even greater for me, because now I have a chance to exhibit in different countries and now meet and greet so many different people. And my last travel to Germany was amazing, because here I am, a Black man who served there so many years earlier, 40 years earlier, and now I'm having this major event, and I'm having conversations with the grandchildren of German soldiers. And we having this great conversation with each other. And I had to touch into that just out of curiosity. And to my amazement, practically every young man I met, my age and a little younger, all their grandfathers had served in World War II. So I'm speaking to the grandchildren, German soldiers. My grandfather was an American soldier. So that was a profound experience. The same thing when I went to Korea, to speak to former Korean soldiers and their children. So the traveling has expanded my knowledge. And it's something I thrive to do. And in my documentation, I want people to feel included. Right now, since my social media platforms are pretty much centered on the local communities right now, I'm trying to connect with them because they need it right now, because we've been hit the hardest by crack and the war on drugs. So you find on my social media feeds, it's a lot in New York for the most part, but I mix it in. I haven't even begun to tap into my international travels right now, which is very vast. From Ethiopia, Italy, France, Germany, Great Britain, and so many other places that I have, mainly young people. So I have a massive body of work, and I'm very grateful to have met so many on this wonderful, wonderful path of life.
That sounds incredible. I wanted to, again, give us a natural break and some more visuals. And when we come back, we'll be talking more around connection and how the Black Arts movement is not just a vehicle. It's a vehicle for change, but it's also, as well as documenting it. So
yeah, that's a young brother I met when I first came home, and he was Shaquem. He was one of the main brothers I met downtown Brooklyn back in the early days, and he became a good friend and someone I documented over time. A really sincere young brother dedicated to improving the lives within the community.
It's a beautiful picture. It really is.
Again, the element of love. One of the things that my father stressed to me to do as a photographer is have themes, working themes. So when I would go out in the street, I already had in my mind what I'm looking for. Love, again, was the cornerstone of the work, but I look for families, I look for mothers and daughters, fathers and sons. So this is a part of that series. The photograph was taken downtown Brooklyn back in the mid-1980s. Another downtown Brooklyn again, a young brother with his giant boombox. And this is one of the main areas I would spend a lot of my time at, because downtown Brooklyn was like the heart and soul of Brooklyn. All trains led downtown Brooklyn. That's a place where you can go and meet people from all over Brooklyn. It was a very central location and was full of energy and life. So just being down on any given day, you would come upon images like this here. So I just thought it was just a really powerful moment to capture this little shorty with this gigantic boombox.
It is actually one of my favorites. It really is. It's absolutely beautiful. It is.
And this is one of my most iconic photographs right here.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to the two brothers in the photograph for posing for me. And the brother on the left with his arms folded to cream, a magnificent young man. I met him around this time at 16 years old, and I photographed him for many, many years. And these were two young men that were very concerned about the community as well, about the youth. And they dedicated their lives to trying to elevate them from falling victim to that negative path. So I call it the righteous brothers because that's who they were. These were young men that were mindful of what they put in the system and what came out of their mouths. And I look to photograph this type of imagery right here to show honor and dignity. The young man with his hands, index fingers pointing to his mind, that represents intelligence and one's desire for knowledge. So it's science within that photograph. Some will look at it and call it a b-boy pose, but it's deeper than that. It signifies men who stand firm on their belief or their square.
It's incredible picture.
This is inside the famous Albee Square Mall in Brooklyn. And again, it goes to that theme of that I was taught. And you have a father and his young son. And the brother, Peace, used to always spend time with his son downtown Brooklyn. We became very good friends. He was concerned with the community. We used to often engage and speak about what was going on amongst our youth. And he used to be side by side with me when we would try to talk to a lot of the young brothers downtown. So this is inside the Albee Square Mall that no longer exists. And it's a very special photograph to me because it shows something that we don't often see. We hear about the absent father, but I beg to differ. You know, I've been very fortunate to meet a number of solid fathers, and I document them. So this is one of my iconic photographs right here. One that's really, really close to my heart. Again, you know, fatherhood. And here you have a father, you know, with his two sons, and I posed it up to kind of like give that element. And sometimes it's necessary to do that because you'll find people who don't mind taking a photograph, but they need to know what to do. So for me, it's just something I thought would be a really powerful image to just show the different stages of growth. And I always made it a point with the photographs that you saw to give everyone a copy. So it was deeper than just recording that moment in time. What brought great joy to me was to go and find the people I photographed and give them a copy of those images so they can have something for themselves. Again, the love, mother and daughter on the bus, things that we see throughout our travels. Here I'm on a bus in Harlem, and I just saw this moment, this decisive moment where you have a mother looking down at her precious son. And I just felt it was a very important photograph.
It's absolutely stunning. And the last one we'll go to before we...
Again, the element of love. I'm in Harlem, walking down the street, always looking, you know, I'm letting my camera, my compass guide me, and I come upon this moment. And not necessarily this moment here, but I saw them on the street, and we started speaking, and I found that's his best friend. They were best friends. And I happened to see the brownstone, and I shifted them from the street, and I just posed them against that brownstone, and I just call it best friends. So it's a very important photograph of mine because we don't see that. Normally you see a couple, we would think that they are in fact a couple, but here you have a really good young man, and he's with his best friend, and they coming from church. So I just knew it would be a special photograph, and it is in fact that. It's one that's really close to my heart because it just shows love and friendship. All right.
It's absolutely, yeah, could go on for days, but you capture amazing ones. We've got some lovely comments from everyone. So thank you. Hearing these experiences gives such great context to the photography. Loving it, from Leanne. Loving the Cazelles. Is that okay? Yeah, for another person. So so in talking, kind of coming back to the connection point and art as playing a central part, not just in highlighting and promoting the thought of unity, and but also as a vehicle for visual liberatory, like, imagination. So especially in this year, I think for me, seeing photographs of us around the world, not just in our pain, but in our collective joy and fight against what is happening to us. I just feel that, what are your kind of thoughts around where we need to go and how we can use the arts movement again, almost as a resurgence? It's always been there, but there was a consciousness in the kind of 70s when the Black Arts movement came, and I'd really like to hear your perspectives on how you think that's going, and how, especially in the last year or two, how we've really been seeing more. I certainly have seen more and more photography that is with a social element to it. So it's not just capturing us, but it's really trying to put us in a light where we are inspired continually. There's a question in there somewhere.
Due to social media, you know, something we didn't have many years ago. Now we have this wonderful vehicle that we can use to address a wide range of issues that are going on around the country, especially with the increase in police shootings and protests that are going on. You have a lot of young people like never before who understand the camera to be a weapon of choice that you could use to fight injustice by being out there in the front lines and document things that you find very troubling. So never in my lifetime have I seen so many young people in particular who are out there documenting what's going on today. And they're creating some really profound images that are addressing the time. And we need that right now to stay informed. Luckily for some of the video footage that we've seen and photographs of police injustice, we're able to see what's going on. Like when you look at what happened to George Floyd, luckily that young woman documented that incident, because if not, we would have never knew that it took place. So there are a lot of hands on deck right now, and we need the artist community to bring about that change. One thing about art, it's a global language, you know, and it's stretching out across the world. Even the fact that you and I are having this conversation right now, and there's people around the world that support my page and my imagery. I have a platform now where I could use this global language to help to inspire people. I was greatly inspired by the vision of W.E.B. Du Bois back in 1900 when he came up with the idea to have a Negro exhibition in Paris. And the idea of that was to show imagery of Black people in America in a dignified way, to use that as a platform to break down all of the negative stereotypes that people were often seeing of us. I'm a firm believer in doing that personally for me, to use my particular platform to show the honor and the dignity that exists that some may not be aware of, because we have been so blinded due to the negative stereotypes that are being played out every day. Because for every positive image you see, there's negative images out there too, that we gotta balance out. Because what's unique about this time that we're living in, everyone for the most part has a device that could create images, both positive or negative. And there's a mix that's out there right now. But we need conscious visionaries on deck to show images that really address issues that are very pressing right now. And I firmly believe that. So we need a resurgence of art movement in general, both the Black arts movement, but the larger art movement overall is very imperative. And I have to go back to music and hip hop and art itself, because one of the greatest experiences I had in my life was when I was invited to Korea, Suwon, Korea, back in 2008 for the International B-Boy competition. And what took place with this competition was B-boys from around the globe gathered in Suwon, compliments of the Korean government, to battle, not battle on a battlefield, but battle on a dance floor. So now you got nations that might have been at war with each other, but now they're battling for supremacy on the dance floor. And the participants are all individuals that are military age. They can easily have been in the military, and not only in the military, but in elite forces, but they opted to embrace hip hop instead. And I found that fascinating. I saw it both in Korea and I saw it in Brazil, where these nations came together. And one of the greatest photographs I took in my life, when we were all gathered around in an auditorium, and I got a group shot of all of these young people who have used the language of hip hop, you know, to battle and to be informed. And I thought that that was incredible. So we need all artists on deck right now. I personally feel that the politicians and the religious leaders have failed. It's incumbent upon the artists right now. One of my mentors is Harry Belafonte, and he often stressed the importance of the arts. See, I grew up during the theater era. You know, back when I came up, we had the Negro Ensemble Theater, where when I came home from, I read about it when I was in the Army, but when I came home, I was going to the theater, I was looking at Black plays. It's there I saw Denzel Washington for the first time, and Chadwick Boseman for the first time in theater. So I'm a firm believer of the arts. We need it. We need the poets on deck. We need the painters on deck. We need the musicians on deck. And it's time to create art that speaks to the time right now. We need it more now than ever before, because we're dealing with so many different crises. You have poverty going on around the world. People are hungry. There's still wars going on. Only thing that's going to change this thing is the artist. So we need to keep that flame alive and create images that are provocative and have the ability to heal and give inspiration, especially during these very difficult days when we've dealt with a lot of loss. This year alone, I've lost so many friends due to a number of reasons, never before in my life. So there's a lot of pain and anxiety out there right now. So if you use your social media platform wisely, you can help people heal and give them a sense of hope and ease some of their anxiety and fear through our channels.
That's Harvey would like to ask, he'd love to hear from you and what you think our role as visual artists of color working to document this current movement so that it doesn't fizzle, causing us to fall into the same type of division between our communities as we were when you returned from the armed forces. That's a great question, actually.
I think that we need all hands on deck right
Yeah.
now. So we need artists to go out there and use wherever city you from, show the love. We see the protests, and that's good, but we need to see the family. We need to see the love. We got to bring that back. Love is the key, and that's what's missing right now, the love. So as visionaries, as artists, we can go out there in the front line and we can capture that. We got to show the pain too, because that's important. There has to be a balance. But right now, we need everybody to take to the cameras and just document. We can enhance our community. It's so much that we can do to show that other side, because a lot of those negative images still being promoted out there, and people have this misconception of us based on what they're seeing on a regular. And like I said, we are dealing with two situations right now. We got the positive images, and we got a lot of negative images out there. So we have to be very proactive like never before, and take to the streets and just document that love, to show the fathers and the mothers and the friendship. And think about it now. We are living in a world where people are now wearing masks, as if we needed that. We are now socially distancing ourselves from each other like never before. We don't want to be close to each other no more. We are no longer able to really embrace each other anymore. So we really need it more now than ever before, because we are more distant and we are more fearful. So how can we work in accordance to this time and show the love and the joy again? And it's kind of hard, even for me, to go back out in the streets and people wearing masks and people are paranoid of each other. It's very troubling to me, which caused me to come back home and just go through my archive. But at the same time, I got to get back out there in a fight, and I got to show that despite everything's going on, you can still capture that element of love and reality at the same time. So we just need all hands on deck right now. We need all conscious artists, regardless of race, color, or creed, to use whatever platform you can to make a difference, from your poetry to the music that you make. We need it right now, because things, troubling times. All my life, when I say it in all my interviews, all I've known is war and hatred. It's been continuous. They may not be the real big wars that we know about, but every second of the day, people are dying and people are suffering. So we need the visionary. It's something about the role of the photographer and understanding the camera as being a weapon of choice. We can win a lot of battles that way if we understand it.
Excellent point, and agreed. And that Harvey's replied 100% agreed. So in actually looking at your last exhibition, well, the one I saw, actually not last, Honor and Dignity, it was speaking about representation and the legacy of a people, and what you want people to see about us and who we are, and to counter the negative, but also not just to counter the negative, but also to enhance our self-esteem and our self-belief in what we can do and what we have done, and our contributions to our own community as well as wider society. And I wanted to talk to you a bit about, you're an honoree for the Gordon Parks Foundation for the exhibition Honor and Dignity, and I actually watched a video of the exhibition opening, and it was powerful. And I just wanted to ask, why then, why now, and what is it in your work that you want to speak to us about the legacy of us, of who we are as a community?
First off, I'm very grateful to the Gordon Parks Foundation for all of the great work they're doing to create platforms for a lot of young artists in the spirit of Gordon Parks. I'm grateful to have met Gordon Parks during my life, and I'm very grateful for his story because it touched my heart. So with the exhibition at the Gordon Parks Foundation, the title was very important, and it goes back to what I stated about the Bows with the Negro exhibition in Paris. I thought that honor and dignity is what we need right now. It's the visual medicine, and I want to create an exhibition that showed dignity, and showed integrity within our community, and we needed to see that. And it's just my little way of using my platform to make a statement. So that was a very important show for me to do. And again, I'm grateful to the foundation for seeing my vision. And those are the type of shows I try to do right now, shows that inspire. Even on my social media feed, when I curate shows every day on Instagram, I'm doing it for a reason, to try to give people a sense of inspiration. And I have a commitment to do that, because the baton isn't passed on to me. Being a recipient of the Gordon Parks Award, it's not just something for just keepsake. I got the award and that's it. It's like, for me personally, the torchlight has been passed on, and I have a responsibility to continue in the legacy of Gordon Parks. For those that really understand his struggle and his concern, especially for Black youth. So it's a responsibility that I have each and every day, in each and every way. I have to use my skill to bring enlightenment to the world. At the same time, I'm trying to create another generation of visual artists that are using the camera as a weapon to fight injustice.
Excellent. Thank you. We've got one more question from Harvey, which is, any tips on navigating around white fragility as we try to get our work published or shared in wider markets? At the end of the day, the folks with the pen in the hand to sign our grants are still white. So essentially, yeah.
It's a very complicated. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it. Essentially, how do they get the work published and shared in wider markets? Any tips?
It's a very complicated industry. When I first got introduced to the industry, it was so much easier. I was able to just walk to a magazine and share a vision with them. And I came with ideas, and that's back in the 90s. Back then we had Trace magazine, we had Vibe magazine, The Source. The Source was an example. I went to The Source magazine with a portfolio, no appointment, and I happened to meet someone in the elevator that worked in The Source. He saw my portfolio, he asked to see the images, he looked at it and said, "This is what we need for our 50th, our 100th issue." And I was able to get my work published. So it was a very different time back then, because there was a number of public magazines that you can go to that were looking for ideas and even new talent. Now it's not like that, because so many people are embracing photography. It's very competitive now, and I don't like to say that, but it's really hard, because so many people see the beauty and power of photography. But it's about having a vision, and a vision that speaks something from your heart that really resonates with the time that we living in, and use your social media platform to kind of like garner that recognition, because you have that now. We didn't have that. You didn't have the space where you could share images. And I know that some people are very apprehensive about putting their work out there, but I think in order to get that type of recognition, it's important. And it's important to follow people who have made it and see what they did in order to get where they were at. For me, I had Gordon Parks as an example. When I looked at his book, Half Past Autumn, I looked at his range of work. And I said, I can't be limited in one particular field. Let me do fashion, documentary, and fine art, and see where it goes. Let me connect with the right people. See, again, it's a different time. See, back in the old days, you can go to an art opening, and you could meet your favorite photographer and engage them and ask them for advice. You could use that space as a place to network with other photographers and visionaries and editors to kind of like, get into the industry. It's different right now, and it's hard. Even we had a great a platform here in New York, Photoville, where you could submit work and be a part of various exhibitions, and they were pretty much open. And that gave people an opportunity to get your work exhibited for the first time. We once had a great magazine called Photo District News that had a number of contests that you can enter on a wide range of subjects, and that magazine no longer exists. So it's very difficult right now, for the young photographer coming out to make it happen. So you have to find a way to do it. If you have the means and the methods, maybe you could self-publish your book and get your work out there. Like my man Anthony Johnson just produced a great book called What's Next, or Who's Next. It's escape. I'm having a senior moment, but it's dealing with barbershop culture. And he self-published his book, you know what I mean? And I thought that was really great, and it's doing really well. So if you have the means, self-publish your book and just get it out there. But it's a very challenging industry right now. And you can probably still find different contests online that you can enter to get your work into exhibitions. Because again, we had that back in the old days where you could become a part of a group show. And now you can gain traction in that industry because at the opening, now your work is hanging on the wall with other great works. And now you have in a position to communicate with each other. So still try to do that. You know, it can still go on right now. I'm not sure how it's being done right now, but it's still important to exhibit and move forward, to show certain work on your social media platform and make sure you tag the right people. You know, never know where it goes, but don't give up. Stay focused and just do it for you. Because what I'm doing right now is really for me and for the people. It's my visual diary of my life, but just as important, it's for the people I photographed to share it with them to a larger world. You know, I wasn't concerned with making money and being rich and famous or nothing. It was never about that. I personally wanted to just contribute to the preservation of history and culture from my perspective. So that's the route that I'm going right now. But again, you know, going back to that question, just study those that did it before and try to gauge it. It's a difficult time, but just keep the faith.
Thank you. Some excellent tips. Okay, so we're running a little bit behind on schedule, but I just do want to pause to see the final images and hear you talk about them, and then we're going to have some closing words. And please do, if you have questions, just write them in the chat.
This is a part of a series that I've been doing in Harlem, and it was greatly inspired by the great Harlem's Renaissance photographer James Vanessy, who documented Harlem during the 1900s. So it's just my way of continuing in that process of documenting Harlem. And this is a part of a project, a second project called Home Fronts, where I photograph people in front of their homes. This is at the Million Women's March in Philadelphia. And it was just a very powerful photograph of these 4 cultural women. And they just had a really beautiful spirit about themselves. And it's just something about this photograph that I just knew would just be magical. So I put in the work. I got on the ground and got deep. And it's one of my, it's a very important photograph to me because it just shows sisterly love. And again, that element of love is in the work. This picture is very close to my heart here, and this will probably be the cover of my next book here. And what makes this special is that it's taken in the community in which I came from, Red Hook. And in that park in front of the young kid, that's the park that I would play in a lot, and my father would photograph me and my sister in that park. And I live right in that area. And that street itself, Lorraine Street, is a street that I crossed so much in my youth at that same age to explore a larger world in my community. So I actually went out there for an event that we call Old Timers Day, where a lot of the people that lived in the projects and still live there come together and gather the second Sunday, the second weekend in August. And I happened to be there, this crowded, packed event. But it's like this child was like sent to me. And despite the crowds out there, which you won't even, you can't see in this photograph, this young boy came out of nowhere and he just stopped on that pole and posed for a few seconds. And I had my camera locked and loaded and I was able to get this photograph here. And to me, it reflects me. And if I shot it in color, you could better understand because you have the Marcus Garvey flag, the red, black, and green flag to the left, and then you have the American flag and no standing any time. So for me, it represents a young boy's coming up in America and the divide and the struggle that one has to endure, you know, and the crossroads that one is at. So it's really symbolic to me. It was taken in 1997, but it really represents my journey in life and the fact that I have this next generation coming up in the community I had grew up with some 20 years earlier.
Incredible. It's an incredible shot.
Oh, this picture here. This is a very painful image to me right here. And I very rarely ever speak about it. And it's a very complex photograph because a lot of people see it and they appreciate it, but it's pain. I call it bittersweet because what's happening here, maybe 20 minutes before I took this photograph, I got into a confrontation with the woman on the left. And sadly, both women are prostitutes, and the individual in the middle was a pimp. And I was walking, going to the Delancey Street, a shopping district, and I happened to see her involved in a sex act. And I had my camera raised and I shot it, and she started screaming at me. And then the pimp came with all of his associates, maybe about 5 of them, and they surrounded me and my partner with the attempt on trying to do bodily harm to us. So we got in a defensive stance, ready to go to war with them. And I had said to him, I said, let me explain to you who I am, and not necessarily who I am, what I represent. And he heard something in my voice, and he calmed down his soldiers, and I was able to break the ice with him and let him know where my heart was at. And he gave it to me. And he told me, he says, I like you. He says, you have my permission to come out here and shoot at any given time. And I did. So I call it bittersweet because, like I said, both women are prostitutes. I don't know who the little boy is, but I was able to capture this moment. If you look at the negative, the whole negative of film, there's a lot going on that negative that nobody understands. And I can't even believe it when I look at the film to say that just a few minutes earlier, we were involved in a heated conversation to the point where she lost her customer and she screamed at me. And I thought it was I'm not going to say it was the end, but it was a very critical situation where if he wasn't open-minded, somebody could have severely got hurt. And I was able to get this moment where you will never know. Mm-hmm. And I took a series of images of them, and I would photograph her over time and him. And so I call it bittersweet, very sad photograph to me. And this is the first time I'm speaking openly about it. I did it in a documentary before, but I paused. But this is that image. It's a lot of pain in here.
Thank you for sharing, Jamel. Seriously, thank you.
You're welcome. This photograph represents when I pretty much came home from the military, and I was traveling through Brownsville. And it's like Marvin Gaye's song, what's happening. I came upon these brothers not too far from the sign. I just shifted them over there and captured that moment. Because I like to create images like that. It's one thing to photograph them together on their mopeds, but when you back them up against the sign, it enhances the message. And this photograph is very dear to me right now, taken in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn upon returning home from the military. So that spirit of brotherly love I try to capture. And this is my target audience right here, trying to get the young brothers on the street that were coming up, because a lot of them were coming up really fast and they were falling victim to the lure of the street. And these are just young kids I met in the neighborhood, and I photographed them. And some of them had tragic endings. And I would find out later on that the young man to the far left is the great rapper AZ out of Brownsville. So that young boy with the Pumas on, he went on to be extremely successful, and I'm happy that he was able to make it. But this just represents the youth that I was trying to say, because we were losing so many at this precious age. So many young men I know died at this stage. So this photograph is important for me to capture, to try to plant a seed in their mind. Again, the love, the brotherly love, and this is in the city of brotherly love in Philadelphia. Actually at a wedding that I was invited to, and I just saw this moment. I just knew I had to capture this moment of just fatherhood, brotherhood, and the whole idea that it takes a village to raise a child. So this photograph is very dear to me. And it just shows you the relationship between the African American and African culture.
This is especially close to my heart, as my father is Nigerian. So I like that image of the green, white, and green.
And this is a brother who has carried on the tradition of Marcus Garvey. And he was a known figure in Harlem back in the days. And I happened to capture him. Brother Moses Power, a really renowned individual that was a part of that whole Marcus Garvey movement that kept that tradition alive. So it was a very important photograph to me to actually go back and just document Harlem in the tradition again of James Vandersea. very important photograph for me here. One of my most important. It's my favorite, and it just represents unity and the coming together. I'm alive today too because of a place in Brooklyn called Prospect Park. It's 585 acres of land. To me, it was my escape from the concrete. I like to call it an oasis in Brooklyn. So when I leave the concrete streets, you know, and the jail and all the violence and negativity, I will find peace going to Prospect Park. This happens to be on a Sunday in the summer where you have a space called Drummers Grove where they play drums and people just come together as family, regardless of race, color, creed.
It's a beautiful image.
People I photographed 20, 30 years ago, I'm now reconnecting with them. So a lot of my work I look at is like frozen moments in time that I've been given the mission to freeze time. I don't even consider myself a photographer anymore. I view myself as an alchemist. I freeze time in motion. And now in 2020, these frozen moments are being thawed out and shared with the universe, and they've given a whole new life of their own. And I'm comforting people. And the stories are amazing. I receive direct messages every day from people who are telling me the impact that my work is having on them. And I want it to be that way. I want it to be visual medicine. And now it's helping them heal. I have fathers that are looking for their sons, trying to better understand how their fathers got murdered and how they lived. There's so many variations that I received. I recently posted an image of a man, woman, and child. I took back in the early 80s, only to find out later on that both the male and the mother fell victim heavily to crack, to the point where the father was murdered and the mother struggled for a long time. But we have now become friends. So it's just amazing how I was given this mission, and now it's all coming full circle because I'm reconnecting with people I photographed 40 years ago. Even young children who I might have photographed at 3, 4, 5 years old, they're seeing their photographs on Instagram, and they're reaching out to me now as young adults. And we are developing friendships with each other. So it has helped me to better understand my purpose in life, you know, why I was put on here. So I'm just trying to use this divine gift, and I got to give thanks for it because I'm forever grateful just to have the ability to see and to show my gratitude. Let me use this gift to contribute to preserving history and bringing joy in a very mean-spirited world.
Melanie says, I think what is particularly interesting about listening to you is understanding the importance of power being passed on through the generations, always building on the pride and strength through the arts. Thanks, Mel. And a visual medicine, so powerful, no words needed. Well, we have come to the end, unless there are any more questions from the audience. I would like to show the last 2 images because I think they're really powerful, and I hope that the internet keeps us going again. And then if it's okay with everyone else, it'd be lovely to hear some closing words from you, Jamel, and I would love to end. So I'll just put up the last two images, or the last image of the PowerPoint.
That's my picture right there. That picture is rooted in a dream that I had. And I was very pained behind the gang culture in this country, you know, and how a lot of young men and women were dying from the colors they were wearing. So it really bothered me, you know, to just see that, you know, that there was a time in the lives of African Americans that we were being killed because of the color of our skin. And as time would go on, we were now being killed for the colors that we wore. So I had this dream, and I decided to use the game of chess as an example of warfare, and in an unorthodox way to make a statement, especially when I was speaking to young children in the various schools in which I was teaching at, many who had fallen victim to gang culture. I wanted to speak to them, and it was this image that I created that allowed me to speak to them and address what was going on in our community. So here you have a young man representing the Crips and a young man representing the Bloods. You have a chessboard that's black and red, which is untraditional. But what makes it unique is the fact that the pieces are both black. And I call this photograph "What Now?" because you can't do anything. You can't play because in order to play, you have to have opposite colors. you know, and you just can't do anything. So now you're at a crossroad where you don't know what to do. So what are you going to do now? The red squares represent the bloods that was the blood that has already been spilled, and the black represents the people who have died. But it gets really deep too, because when you look at fraternities, traditional fraternities are based on colors. Politics in America is the red states and the blue states. So this is beyond blood and crip. This is just conflict in general, and finding solutions to eradicate the conflict. Even when you have the Democrats and Republicans, what is the middle ground that we could use to move forward? You know, so this photograph, again, was based off a dream that I'll go out there and recreate in order to make a statement, to get the attention of young people that we must be brothers. That's the whole series of work I created. We must first be brothers, and we need to make that happen, because what I found amongst particularly the gang culture, that guys could be best friends, but unfortunately you might have been born on the wrong side of town that made you the enemy to another people. And it just pains my heart to know that so many young people have died violently based on colors and gang culture. And I can understand gang culture to a degree, because it serves as an extended family for a lot of people who are in fact broken. You know, within our community, you have a lot of people who have been raised in foster care, kids that don't know love, kids that fell victim to the system, both foster care and incarceration. So the gang now has become a family. So I'm not hating on no one, because I could easily have fallen victim into that culture. But it's about understanding and trying to move forward and make a better life for ourselves.
That's incredible. It's an incredibly powerful shot.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Lots of David Grace says, so powerful, both players playing with black pieces. Wow, this has made me go cold. Love when art stops your thoughts dead in their tracks. Okay. I think I can safely say for everyone, it has been an incredible evening listening to you, looking at visual medicine, which is what I would call it. It's been a complete honor. Most people know this, especially my close friend, but you are one of my extremely favorite photographers of all time, Jamel, and it's honestly deeply, I'm so grateful that you agreed and that we had this time with you. And I would of course love to do another conversation with you, maybe exploring what you're going to do next.
The thing I gotta do is make sure you get a print. You know, being that you shared that with me, that means a lot to me. So once things slow down a little bit, that's the first thing I like to do, is get a print to show my gratitude, not only for what you've done for me today, but what you're doing in general. You know, when you reached out to me, you know, there's no way I could have turned you down. I'm happy that I did. So I'm so grateful, you know, for this opportunity, the space that you created for me, and you will always have my support. And let's continue to move forward, and hopefully one day we will meet each other. But in the meantime, let's continue to use our platforms to try to bring some joy and love in this very mean world.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave on one of your images, and I'm going to just play a joint favorite song of ours. So feel free to leave some more comments for Jamel. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed this evening.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. All right. Peace. And as people, we can make this world a better place. We all have the power to make this world a better place. Yeah. And I think we need it now, by just reaching out to people and just reaching out, checking up on people, you know, using our platforms again to just put music and imagery that inspires love. It's so much that we could do to make a difference, you know, and just picking up the phone and checking up on people, doing good deeds. I'm a firm believer that we must strive to do good deeds in life, and it comes back to you. You know, we all have the power to make the world a better place. So I thank everybody for tuning in. And as we close out this year, and that's the beauty of photography for me, it has brought me on this path where I've been able to connect with all of you. So my camera, my compass on this day has allowed me to connect with everyone here indirectly. And that's a blessing. This young man I met when I came home from the military, and we became close friends, and he got murdered, sadly. He was a wonderful, wonderful young man. And he lived around the corner from me, Carol. And that style he has is a Caribbean American style. He's a wonderful young man, and just sadly, I could not save him. You know, he fell victim to the shoe. He was a really good brother, and I reconnected with his son just recently. So that picture means a lot. I'm happy to have honored his legacy, to have frozen this moment in time, you know, so his spirit lives on. He's physically gone, but through this image, he would always exist. This picture is very special. 42nd Street, I spent a lot of time in Times Square. What's so profound about this photograph, one's name is Angel and the other one's name is Moses. So I met an angel and I met Moses on 42nd Street. So it's a very powerful photograph here with an even deeper backstory, which I'm not even going to get into right now. This is one of my very first photographs back in the days. It was taken in 1975 with a Kodak Instamatic camera. So this is when I really first started out. You could tell I was new because I got the garbage can in the background and I didn't really crop anything. But I was starting out. And these are two of my friends. You know, Angel was from my crew back in the days, and Cheryl, you know, so they lived in the neighborhood, and this is how we dressed back in the days for the most part. So this is taken with a Kodak 110 camera. And I'm glad I still got the prints. A very special photograph that would start me in my photographic journey.
Amazing. Thank you. And we have come to the end of the conversation. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Victoria, once again for this opportunity. I thank everyone in the listening audience who took time to participate. And you can hit me with a DM. I get kind of overloaded, so I may not be able to respond in time, but I will strive to the very best of my ability to respond to everybody. But again, in my closing statements, let's use our internal gifts to make this world a better place. Everyone can make a difference in some form or fashion. We really can. So everyone be well, happy holidays to you, and hopefully our paths will cross again in the near future.
Thank you so much. God bless.
God bless you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.